Welcome to the Juras-Sick Park-Cast, the Jurassic Park podcast where guests chat with me about Michael Crichton's 1990 novel Jurassic Park, and also not that too. My name's Ryan Rogers, and I'm a big, dumb Jurassic Park fan. Welcome back! It's been a minute, hasn't it? But we're back for episode 66, Iterations, recorded on June 20th, 2024. Thanks for joining me today. A continued thank you to Christoph Oakes of Snail, S-N-A-L-E. Check out his incredible albums on Spotify and Bandcamp. Today's intro is from The Incredible Monster from the Center of the Earth, from the soundtrack to The Incredible Monster from the Center of the Earth, and the outro is Sacrifice to the Inhuman Creature from Snail's debut album, Snail. Start with some corrections in trivia. In the trivia section in episode 33, Breeding Sites, with my terrific guest Jamie Rayum, I asked how many velociraptors were in the film, and I said 3. But that doesn't account for the newborn infant in the beginning that Grant watches hatch in the nursery. So, there may actually be 4 raptors in the park. But in the film, there are 2 more raptors. There are 2 skeletons of velociraptors, which are technically raptors as well. 3 in the park, 2 fossilized in Montana, and 1 in the nursery, technically. I for a long time believed that Rana, when mentioned in Jurassic Park, the novel, was referring to amphibian DNA, that the term amphibian DNA was Rana, R-A-N-A, but that's totally incorrect. Totally. My mistake. Rana is the species term for frog, so a common frog is Rana temporaria, and a leopard frog is Rana pipiens, and a bullfrog is Rana caducibianca, and a striped burrowing frog is Ciciorana, a bagutata, and so on. I probably said all of those things incorrectly. So Rana is apparently the Latin word which imitates a frog's croak, if you believe that. Rana. So that's where that one comes from. But that's a big mistake I always had. And in each episode, I make sure to give a heartfelt thank you to my guests who spend their time and mind on this show. And I thank you, the listeners, who I hope enjoy hearing about one of our favorite books, but I am embarrassed to say I have never thanked Michael Crichton. I know this may be too many years too late, but thank you, Michael Crichton. I was immediately enraptured by your stories, fell in love with how you were able to bring dinosaurs into the common discourse, challenge readers' preconceptions about science, and generally speaking, I really looked up to you. I felt like you'd made a good role model, I guess, when I was growing up. It was a really sad day when we got the news that you had passed. All right, dinosaur news. A new titanosaur was named in the March 2024 edition of Cretaceous Research in the paper Phylogenetic Relationships of a New Titanosaur from the Upper Cretaceous of Uruguay. Udalar titan, Celeste, was a small-sized titanosaur measuring from 15 to 16 meters in length. Its titanosaur affinity is suggested by several anatomical traits, such as strongly proculus vertebrae spanning throughout the tail, a condition known only in most titanosaurs and several mamenchisaurids. Udalar is an acronym for the Universidad de la República, and Titan is Greek for giant, and Celeste is Sky Blue, a nickname for the Uruguayan international sports teams. So Udalar's Sky Blue Giant is what the name means. The holotype FC DPV 3595, housed at the vertebrate fossil collection Facultad de Ciencias Universidad de la República, was uncovered from the Guichon Formation. It's comprised of multiple tail vertebrae and some limb bones. This is the second titanosaur from Uruguay, and the other being Aeolosaurus, described in 2022, and it's phylogenetically been narrowed down to being either a saltasaurine saltasaurid or a non-saltasaurid saltasauroid. So, saltasaurids were mostly smaller than giant titanosaurs. Of course, almost everything is smaller than giant titanosaurs. And their necks and tails were held almost parallel to the ground, and their small heads had only tiny peg-like teeth for stripping leaves off plants. Some featured scutes on their backs, and some more derived saltasaurians had clubs on their tails. Udalar titan was saltasaur-ish phylogenetically, and would have resembled something like that. More generally, with over 80 species, titanosaurs represent the most successful and diverse sauropodomorph group, and were the most abundant herbivorous large-bodied group in the late Cretaceous of Gondwana, in strong contrast with the ornithischian-dominated coeval faunas of Laurasia. So if you're in the southern continents and in the Cretaceous, you're going to find titanosaurs, whereas if you're in the northern continents, there are mostly ornithischians, like hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, and kylosaurs, and those types of things. Our next news story is an unexpected early diverging iguanodontian dinosaur from the Upper Jurassic of Portugal, from the March 2024 edition of the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology, in which they describe a new species of iguanodontian. Hesperonyx martinho tomas horum is a new, very general, very basic, unremarkable ornithischian of the late Jurassic period. Hesperus is Latin for west, Onikos is Greek for claw, Martin Ho Thomasum is Latin to honor Michael Martin Ho and Carla Alexandra Thomas. So Martin Ho and Thomas's western claw. The holotype ML2700, housed at the Museo de la Reina, was uncovered from the Lorena Formation. It's comprised of a partial left hind limb and isolated forelimb bones. 2 phylogenetic analyses recover Hesperonyx as an indeterminate dryomorphin estimated to be between 3 and 4 meters in length. Dryosaurids are famously overlooked for being medium to large-sized, unspecialized bipedal herbivores with sharp-ridged cheek teeth, 5-fingered hands, and long stiffened tails. They sort of don't scream exciting when you think of dinosaurs. Why else aren't they exciting? Well, the paper also admits, quote, iguanodontian ornithopods are some of the most abundant dinosaurs in the fossil record, making them terrifically common animals on top of sort of basic. But because this creature is sort of uncommon in terms of where it was found and from when it is believed to have lived, it may hold more scientific value than you'd imagine at first blush. There are lots of iguanodontians, and they're known from all over the world, but, quote, their internal relationships have sparked heated debate due to several phylogenetic paradigm shifts. Late Jurassic basally branching iguanodontians in particular are not well understood in terms of their systematic affinities and evolutionary relevance. So this paper believes that Hesperonyx will add some new materials to help contribute to the greater picture of late Jurassic ornithischians, especially in Europe, where the fossil record for these animals is, quote, meager compared with North America. All right, with the corrections and the dinosaur news out of the way, please let me introduce you to my special guest this episode. Joining me today is Rob Luther, who has been hosting what is presently named the Turtles Forever podcast, a small network of family-friendly podcasts covering everything Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the official home of Turtle Flakes, Turtle Tales Radio, Turtle Vision, and more since the fall of 2013, can you remember? He has published more than 250 episodes just chatting about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in bits and pieces across all the different mediums, whether it's one of the many different TMNT cartoon shows, one of the many different TMNT movies, or one of the many different TMNT comics, which have come out since 1984. How are you doing today, Rob?
I am fantastic. Thank you for that lovely introduction, man. It's been a long time coming to be here, but I am thrilled. Love Jurassic Park and a big fan of yours, so looking forward to this.
Oh, you're too crazy. 10 years is a lot of ground to cover, and it shows a commitment and a dedication, but also a passion, and I think a genuine appreciation for your fandom there. So that's special. I think it's good.
Well, thank you so much, man. There's been some breaks in between. It's just one of those things where life kind of gets in the way, but I have loved doing it. And that's what keeps bringing me back, just like you with Jurassic Park, I'm sure. It's just a love for the content that, we try to get away. And even with all the changes of life, right? Sometimes the inertia of life will kind of pull you away. But if you truly love something always, just when you think you're out, something pulls you back in. You know what?
Isn't that the way? Yeah. So people won't know this, but maybe you can refresh my memory here. Rob and I met back when a viscous substance known as mutagen, but also as ooze, came into contact with us, and either we mutated into the last creature we came into contact with, or the Q&A of our ancient samurai ancestors was transplanted into us, or it reverted us to an earlier genetic state, or it simply increased our size, strength, and intelligence somewhat, or we ate the mutagen and we mutated into the last thing we ate. Can you recall which it was? I'm hazy on the mythology of our meeting.
I can't remember when that truck drove by, but I'll tell you what, you might have gotten the super intelligence, but I think I devolved a little bit. So, over time.
If you mutated into the last thing you ate, what would it? How would you be doing today?
Well, then I would be a scrambled egg right now. So, or would I be the chicken before? I don't know.
Yes.
What about you?
I would. I'm already mutated into a living cup of coffee. So basically, I'm just extend the percolation process between the coffee pot and the bathroom. I'm just one extra step.
Absolutely, man. That would have been the next thing I would have mutated into. Absolutely.
So like me, you've entered into this podcast sphere out of an excess of appreciation for something you clearly love from your childhood. Wager like me, you started with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon in the 80s, and were knocked out of your socks by the film in the 1990. And then that segued into maybe like Archie comics. Does that sound like the right pathway for people of our age?
Oh, for sure, man, for sure. I was definitely, I was born in 1986, so I was probably 4, maybe close to 5 when the first movie came out. But the timeline's fuzzy for me, but I know the first movie is one of the earliest things I can remember, and I've told the story many times on my show that. I went to the movie theater with my mom, and For some reason, I don't know why, I thought the turtles during the apartment fire with April O'Neil, I thought the turtles were in the fire, so I started crying and everything. My mom had to pull me out of the theater, reassure me the turtles were okay. Sure enough, we come back in. I find out they're just fine. But I remember from that moment forward, man, I had to find the cartoon, or maybe I found the cartoon first. Can't remember, but it was right around that same time period. I was huge into the cartoon. As soon as school let out, I mean, I could walk home, so I would literally run home so I could catch the cartoon in syndication. I begged my parents for the toys growing up, and yeah, man. And the funny thing is, even after all these years, again, you know, I get a little older, get into some other things, you know, like Power Rangers, X-Men, Spider-Man. Really love Spider-Man too, but I don't know. Even in the late 90s, I kept going back to those old VHS tapes I had as a kid and replaying those. Must have played that 1990 movie over and over and over and again, because it got to the point where I'd play the rooftop scene with Shredder and the Turtles fighting, and the music kicks in. I mean, the adrenaline pumping and everything. I must have played that scene over and over so many times that the magnetic strip broke on it, and my parents had to give me a new VHS tape of it. But yeah, so late 90s, I was still going back to the Turtles. I found the comics in the early 2000s. I remember getting like a big eBay lot of Ninja Turtle comics.
Oh, neat.
And also, well, actually, to back up a little bit, when I went to go visit my dad, we moved down south in like 2003, I think, 2002. But we would go up in the summers and still see my dad in New Jersey. And I remember one time on my way to, I was walking around the neighborhood around my dad's house, found this comic shop, and I go in there and I see all these Ninja Turtle comics. And I never really knew the cartoon and everything was based on the comic. So that was kind of my first foray into the comics. I might have seen the Archie books as a kid, but anyway, long story longer, got really into the comics, and eventually in 2012, 2013, we started a podcast called The Retro Junkies, and I really, really wanted to do a Ninja Turtles podcast spin-off. We'd actually done 2 episodes based on Turtles games, and that's where I got the idea. And my buddy Landon, he was my co-host of The Retro Junkies, and he couldn't do the show, the Turtles show. So I found a mutual friend in the kind of our internet circles, and he was all for it. So, you know, I was never a Ninja Turtles expert. Still am not an expert. I'm usually not the best with the latest Ninja Turtles content or anything like that, but I franchise, and that's basically the mission since day one, over 10 years ago on the podcast, was let's discover as much as I possibly can. You know, all the things that I missed as a kid that I can discover now as an adult, because I'm still just a big kid and I still love them.
Well, what's interesting is I think the theme of this episode today I'm doing is it's going to be on iterations, and that was a big part of the novel. It never really made its way into subsequent, I guess, media with Jurassic Park, but certainly Ninja Turtles have had many different iterations, and it was such a big practical element of the novel. And so you get these fractal curves, and the iterations are all like this graph of how a living system with all its incalculable factors mixing together changes going forward, and each iteration reveals that it's moving in an unpredictable new direction, because there are just too many variables to play to forecast the future with any hope of accuracy. And your podcast has kind of gone through iterations as well, which is kind of fun. How would you describe the iterations of your podcast over the last decade? It takes, you know, things have to grow over time, and I imagine you're not presently where you thought you might be all those years ago.
Oh yeah. If you were to tell me that I'd still be podcasting about Ninja Turtles 10 years later, I'd be like, what? Are you crazy? But yeah, you're exactly right. Like, it started off where it was just myself and my buddy Josh Witt, and then first couple years it was like that, you know, and then Josh, he got a new job. He's had a lot of job changes over the years, and eventually my wife finished up her master's degree. We moved to Tennessee. My dad got sick around that time, 2015, so I had some personal changes going on as well, and Josh couldn't record anymore, so I found another guy named Josh I really liked from a different podcast, Josh O'Rourke. I invited him to come on as a special guest, and he was great. He was the yin to my yang, because he's, well, I don't know. I love talking to him, because he would point out some stuff that, you know, I'd be like, I'm one of those guys. I love everything Turtles. You know, it's really hard for me to look at them objectively, where he's going, no, Rob, this story actually sucks, and here's why. so there was many episodes when it was just Josh O'Rourke and I. That was a really fun long stretch of episodes, but eventually, Josh and I couldn't. Once again, life circumstances, we couldn't really make it work anymore with our schedules and everything else. So then, right around the time that COVID hit, I was about to go through a job change, but I was working in the school system with a friend named Kirkland, who was like, we would talk wrestling together, we would talk movies like Jurassic Park together, we would talk about all kinds of stuff. And my wife came up with the idea. She's like, well, wait a minute. Since you're getting a new job in a new school system, but you'd like to stay close with Kirkland, why don't you talk Turtles with him? I was like, that's a brilliant idea. Why did I think of that?
Wives, they're always right, aren't they? Yeah.
Amen, man. Amen. I'll tell you, I need to listen to her a lot more than I do. But yeah. So since then, it's just been Kirkland and I, and then now Zach from Booyaka Show, another Ninja Turtles podcast. We do some of the IDW comics when we can. But I don't know if you go through this, but for me, I think the greatest challenge of podcasting it's the passion's always been there, but it's the consistency that for me has been a challenge over the years. There's been many times where I was like, okay, we're going to do weekly. And then it was like, oh, maybe bi-weekly. And then now it's just like, so when I can. But, maybe my own kind of held the show back a little bit, but, that's okay. But have you ever kind of gone through any of those challenges?
Well, I know, yeah. So one of the I guess hurdles with the way I set up my show was that it was always based on this premise that I have a guest on each episode, and that wasn't always easy to get a new person to be available all the time. And so I had to become gentle and forgiving with myself in terms of sticking to the weekly. And so when I let that go, because there was no reason in getting uppity with people and stuff like that, that just wasn't a non-starter. You know what I mean? So it was about just taking your time, receiving it as good. But I got to get, in terms of doing a weekly analysis on each of the chapters, I got way ahead on that part, which was kind of nice. But in terms of hosting the interview, but it gave me lots of time to prep for interviews and get really neat ideas. But also at the same time, I mean, most of the people on the show are people I've never met and who do not know me.
Oh, wow.
And so it does, I can't imagine what it must be like to have just an email show up in your inbox and be like, hey, I'm a guy who I have a podcast, and I was wondering if you like, I can't imagine what that email must look like to people. But well,
I'll tell you, for me, it was like, oh wow, this guy actually wants to talk to me. Well, this is nice, Not many people usually invite me on their show, so I was very, very happy to do it, man. But I know exactly what you're talking about. Getting guests on can be a challenge at times,
especially when they're busy and they're great. Like when you have the writers and the editors for the comic books to come on the show, like. They're busy. And if they tell you they ain't available, I believe them, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, I like what you said earlier about, you kind of have to give yourself some grace on that. And you go, you know what, we're doing the best we can. This is a passion project. This is what we just do for fun. It keeps us out of trouble. I think that's a great outlook. But it took me a while to kind of get there. I think early on, I didn't know I was doing this, but I wanted to make the podcast so much bigger. I wanted it to grow so fast, and get more eyes and ears on the show. And then finally I kind of let that all go and go, you know what? That's not why I originally wanted to do this. I want to do this because I love content.
Yeah.
So.
And I think a lot of the pressure would be there if you had a sponsor, or if you had advertisers and you needed.
Oh, absolutely.
You were obligated to do. You had some fiduciary duties to produce, and then all of a sudden the pressure goes up, and to
whole
keep
dynamic changes.
The fun of it,
yes, exactly,
becomes proprietary, and it's not as much. The fun kind of just They say do what you love, and you never work a day in your life. But if you make the things you love and do what you do to make money, it can affect the fun part. Gets chisels away at, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And I didn't want it to feel like a job. I never, ever wanted a podcast to feel like a job. So, that's kind of why I've shied away from, sponsors and things like that over time. But, it's worked out. We're still doing it all these years later. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's right. So, Ninja Turtles podcast, they all have different iterations. And I was just looking at So Jurassic Park's got a bunch of stuff coming up in the next little bit too. The Ninja Turtles are rebooting and have a new iteration of their comic strip. IDW's got that's launching like right now. Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. But I was just laughing with my wife about Michael Crichton has a big 12 months coming up. He's got a new novel out in partnership with James Patterson called Eruption. Twisters is coming out as a sequel to his screenplay Twister in 1996. There's a new iteration of Chaos Theory, which is built off of the Camp Cretaceous Netflix cartoon. And there will be a 7th Jurassic Park movie coming out next year.
Wow.
And he's been dead since 2008.
I was going to say, wait a minute now.
So
I was like, man, I didn't read my notes correct.
The celebrity of Michael Crichton continues to to be worth quite a bit.
He's still
pretty incredible, yeah. He is like the godfather of intellectual properties, yeah. He and Stan Lee.
Yes, amen. You know, that is wild, though, because I remember reading a book, I think it was called The Bone Wars by Michael Crichton was credited on it. I think that's what it was called.
Maybe Dragon Teeth. Else. How's that? About the Bone Wars.
That sounds correct. Yes, That's it. Based on the Bone Wars. And it was fascinating, but I kept thinking, didn't the guy die like 10 years before this? You know, so, but I love the book, and, you know, he continues to live on his storytelling in one form or another.
So have any of his other works, have you been a fan of Michael Crichton's other things, like in particular?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I have read the first book, Jurassic Park. I read that probably 10 years ago, and I remember really enjoying it. And if I remember correctly, I think, wasn't there a few scenes from The Lost World that are kind of referenced in the first book? Mm-hmm. Because I remember thinking, wait a minute, didn't that happen in The Lost World instead of the first movie? Because I'd obviously seen the movies first, but I don't remember a lot about the plot, but I do remember really enjoying the book, and I'd love to go back now with fresh eyes and reread it myself.
The movies are so accessible in terms of they're quick to get through. Yeah. They make impressions on you visually, emotionally, acoustically. I mean, there's a lot of ways that it hits you, right? The sound, the score, the visuals are incredible. The direction and the setting, it all plays together to make it very memorable. And novels aren't always the same way. But had you been fascinated with the 1990 Ninja Turtles movie and then discovered that there was comics, to go back and see the source material it would be like the same with seeing Jurassic Park the film and going, holy smokes, there is a book, and then you go through that and to see where it all kind of found its spark is exciting and thrilling to do. And
absolutely,
yeah. And I love just working with the source and see, I guess, where sometimes you'll see bits and pieces where you go, oh, I see where they got that from the novel, or I see that they reread the novel to find inspiration to move forward, even 40 years later as they're working on developing new Jurassic Park stories for people.
Well, the thing that's interesting too is I think the book came out in like the late 80s, early 90s, correct? And so it wasn't too long before the movie came out, and yet, I mean, I bet you some film producer or somebody, when they first read this book, went, we have got to make this a movie. And, I mean, they made it happen very, very quickly. I mean, it's such a cool idea, such a unique idea that it, at the time, really just hadn't been seen on the big screen yet. And, I remember when it came out, my parents would let me go see it at first. I was still a little young. I do specifically remember the trailers for it, the commercials for it, and my first exposure to Jurassic Park was actually the Sega Genesis game when it came
cool.
out. Yeah. And, at the time, I remember getting it at Blockbuster going, oh, my gosh, this is amazing. But at the same time, it was so frustratingly hard that it was kind of a love-hate thing. But I still remember sitting in my dad's living room, cutting on the Sega Genesis, and if you let the Jurassic Park game play, there's a scene where the little Jeep is driving through, and all of a sudden the T-Rex shows up in the lightning storm and bites the fence and eventually grabs the Jeep. That terrified me as a kid, but I was fascinated. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to see this movie. So I didn't get to see the first one in theaters, but when it came out on VHS, my neighbor Dave, he had a big screen TV and a surround sound system. And I just happened to be in the living room, his living room, and he was playing it. He also kind of got me into hockey. It was the first time I'd ever seen hockey was on this big screen TV. So that big screen TV was just mind-blowing for a kid. But anyways, seeing Jurassic Park for the first time, it felt like almost in a movie theater. I was both, once again, terrified and just amazed at the same time. I'd never seen anything like it. And honestly, from that moment forward as a kid, it made a huge impression on me. I asked for some Jurassic Park toys at Christmas. I still remember I had a little, I think it was a Dilophosaurus. Is that the spitter? Is that what it was?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, okay. And I just remember having the little Jurassic Park lunchbox, and I specifically remember the trading card set. I had some of those as well. Yeah, the Topps trading cards. But, oh my goodness, I just remember, I'd say 93, 90, we went, when The Lost World came out in like 96, 97, I remember watching that in theaters, and once again, just being terrified and excited at the same time, even as an older kid.
Well, there's something about the way the shots and the pacing were composed, where like the Tyrannosaur breakout scene is like an 8-minute or a 9-minute scene. Like the tension and suspense and the delay of what's going to happen. There isn't like jump cuts. It's not fast, and so there's just a lot of like watching sweat drip down your head, and just waiting, and that waiting is the terrifying part. Like, oh, come on, if you're gonna eat me, just get this over with. But and the raptors too. The raptors are stalking and they're waiting and they're patient. Like even so with when Muldoon is going to the maintenance shed and he thinks he's got the raptors in his sight, nothing is done fast. Everything kind of emerges generally, and I think Spielberg was a master in terms of building that. Everything about it was put together. I think when dinosaurs are really doing slowly paced, stalking sort of inquisitive things, there isn't a lot of background music at all. Like he really just lets the ambiance of the jungle kind of be what you hear. And then of course, when it's supposed to be thrilling, he's got thrilling music. Like when the T-Rex is chasing the Jeep down that path. Oh. That's got a score. That's a thrill. That's Indiana Jones. That's not getting hunted by animals. That's just a chase.
Amen. Amen. Oh my gosh, I'll never forget that. And he, like, kind of go back to what you were saying about, there being some anticipation at first. When you hear, I think it's when the guy in the front seat of the Jeep, he's got a glass of water, and you see the water start to tremble. You're like, oh my gosh, he's coming. And I remember as a kid being so afraid, but I couldn't look away. At the very end, after all the destruction, and I remember it cuts right after that, and the feeling you get knowing all the carnage that this T-Rex had just caused after that very lengthy scene as you described, it's just like, holy cow, I cannot believe that just happened. And that was the feeling I felt.
And then that moment in the novel kicks off one of the first iterations they have there. Like Nedry has just disabled the park, and the next thing is everybody's kind of chilling, thinking, hey, it'd be neat to see the T-Rex with these night vision goggles. That'd be kind of cool. And then it comes through the fence, and it basically puts its attention on every soul that was there in the cars with them. And every single one of them gets basically left for dead. You don't know. It implies that every single person has been massacred, and then so each chapter kind of subsequently picks up where it goes back to like the lodge or something like that, and they're just chatting, and they're like, oh yeah, when they get back we're gonna do this and stuff like that. Let's have the dinner ready for them. And then you slowly have one chapter after another that says, oh yeah, Grant wakes up, finds out that he just got kicked across the street or something like that, and then the next one's Timmy finds himself up in a tree, and you slowly see, oh okay, everybody I guess is still here. but yeah, the whole scene is fascinatingly put together. Really, really, when they picked, like, this is the moment, and it's like when they build it into the film, shot for shot, it's very, very similar. And
really,
because it's perfect. I mean, the way he wrote it, you wouldn't change a thing. And I mean, it's not exactly the same, but awfully good.
And I guess Michael Crichton, he helped write the screenplay for the movie, right?
Yeah. So I've been kind of looking into the screenplays, and there was his book, and then I guess he had been working with Spielberg on the development of ER at the time, and had mentioned Jurassic Park to Spielberg somehow during those conversations, and Spielberg said, oh, I'll be interested in hearing about that for a film. And then so I guess Crichton had a draft that he prepared. Then another screenwriter, Maria Scotch Marmo, was the next writer to take a run at his draft. And then after that, it was David Koepp came in and revamped the script that had been rewritten again. And then as I understand it, as they were shooting, they're like, or putting the final pieces together, they're like, and then Spielberg had a couple tweaks. So there's a couple hands in the cookie pot there, but David Koepp gets the credit.
So after the fact, what did Crichton think about this? Do you know?
I don't know officially, but I have seen something where he was eager to do television and to do movies. That was a passion of his, and so he wanted to do that, and he did a bunch of films and he did a bunch of TV, and as I understand it, he wasn't disillusioned with the fact that, if you want to option my book and make a script, if you pay for it, I understand that you have to make some changes to adapt, and as long as the check clears, I'm okay with that. I don't know that, like, I'm sure he would have personally said, you missed the point, but I don't think that he would have ever got to a point where he's like, I'll never do this again. I think he was very happy to have his name out there and to be...
Especially with that juicy check from that first movie.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was all for the money, but I mean, his ambition was to make movies, was to write screenplays and stuff like that. I don't know if it's because he was told he was never supposed to be a writer, which, as I understand it, he was told, you go to med school, okay? You're not supposed to be a writer. And I think that he just, he took that... You got to be careful what you tell people, yeah. I'll be the greatest writer there ever was. Did you have a favorite dinosaur growing up? Did your favorite dinosaur ever appear in any of the Jurassic Park films?
Oh, well, I wasn't... honestly, I have to give a lot of credit to the film. The film made me a fan of dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. I think, of course, the obvious answer was the T-Rex scene. That I remember when that first scene went down, I said, that is the most terrifying creature I've ever seen in my life. So I was fascinated with the T-Rex. But I was also fascinated with the Brachiosaurus. I just think it's such a majestic-looking dinosaur that's in the film. Mm-hmm. My favorite animal at anytime we go see... I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, and anytime we're in the Knoxville Zoo, I'll go check out the giraffes. Mm-hmm. I just think they're just such massive and also beautiful creatures that I've always kind of had this appreciation and fascination with those. But... yeah, I remember getting a bunch of T-Rex toys as a kid, and I think they had a Brachiosaurus figure. I'm sure they probably did. There were so many Jurassic Park figures as a kid, but yeah, I guess those would be my two for now. But yeah,
Brachiosaurus is a good choice. I know, and you describe it well. In the novel, Crichton makes a point to make sure that he says that they look dignified. And I think there's something about the posture, and there's something about the erectness that seems regal or majestic. And,
yes.
And certainly when you envision a giraffe, you think of it that way. You can't imagine them being like slobs and being hunched and having poor posture.
No, of course not.
So, yeah, no, they have a commanding presence. Undoubtedly. You go into a museum, and there's usually a sauropod out front if it's not a tyrannosaur, and the sauropod will command your attention. Pretty incredible stuff. Oh. Good choice, definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, is that one of the, besides the raptors, is that one of the first dinosaurs well, I don't know if Grant sees the raptors in the movie at first. I remember when they first get to the park, don't they see a Brachiosaur, or was it the Triceratops? I can't remember off the top of my head.
That's right. So they drive in, and on the way in towards the visitor center, the first thing they come across is the Brachiosaur, and then there's like a pond that has a few hadrosaurs out in the pond with Brachiosaurs, and then they go to go on the tour and things like that. Yeah, I love dinosaurs too. I use this podcast in Jurassic Park to jimmy my way into conversations about dinosaurs, and it's been
that's all right. That's perfect.
But it's granted me like doing this show has given me a chance to speak with paleontologists, with filmmakers, with novelists, people who engage in the sort of creative process and stuff like that. The medium of the podcast and the idea of, I guess, having a hook that gets people in to start a conversation has been fascinating. Have you found, I guess, with your show, how has it granted you access or helped you interact in ways with a subject you love? Maybe ways that, surely you wouldn't have had a chance to do had you not been hosting something, right?
Oh, man, that's a great question.
For example, I know you've had voice actors on the show. I know you've had, from the original cartoon, you've had a chance to speak with the writers and the artists on the comic book series. I think you, I don't know, you had Eastman and Laird, or you had Kevin Eastman, or you had one of them.
Kevin Eastman, yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I mean, how do you do? That's not bad.
Well, I will say this: it's a dream come true. It's always kind of surreal when you meet your heroes, and you're always a little nervous, like, oh gosh, what if they turn out to be a jerk? You know, they say you've heard that cliche before about
Don't
meet
meet
your
your
heroes,
heroes, yeah.
but yes, but thankfully, at least for the Ninja Turtles franchise, I have not run into a single jerk the entire time. I remember our very first interview was Pat Fraley, who was the voice of Krang from the original cartoon. And we were maybe 4 or 5 episodes in, back in 2013, I guess. And I'm nervous. I am so nervous. I've never done this before. I'm a people pleaser anyway. So I'm like, oh, I hope he has a good time. I hope I don't want to over fanboy here. But he just set the tone. He really set the tone. He was so kind, so generous with his information, and was willing to stay on way longer than we asked him to. And honestly, every single guest that we've had since then, another really nice one, Townsend Coleman, the voice of Michelangelo from the original cartoon. Kevin Eastman, the co-creator, wonderfully nice guy. He's come on our podcast 3 or 4 times now. So to answer your question, it's a dream come true, but it's also been really easy because our guests have been so kind, So, and honestly, over the years, every artist, every writer that we've talked to, we just talked to Sophie Campbell, who's doing the current IDW comics, or actually just finished up 150. It's like, it's so surreal, but it's a blessing at the same time. And yeah, it's just been easy over time. And when you look back, yeah, we don't have a lot of listeners, but we've had an amazing ride. And as a fan, I mean, it just bolsters what I love. And I'm sure it's probably been the same for you, I guess, hearing different people's perspectives over time from different creators involved in Jurassic Park in some way probably makes you appreciate the franchise even more, and of course dinosaurs even more.
Yeah, being able to chat with paleontologists on what they think about dinosaurs, and sometimes you have like a query about them that's you're not going to find in a book or something, and they don't. I mean,
Right.
Usually it's stuff like, oh, we'll never know, but I'll be like, yeah, but you must have a hunch or something you personally believe, and then they give you that, and these are people who spent a career thinking about it, so that's kind of fun for sure.
That's fascinating. That's awesome.
I'm trying to recall. So is Judith Hoag still on your wish list?
Oh yes, she is. I actually, 2 things happened. I think for a brief time we had a third co-host on the show. His name was Thaddeus Manning.
Yeah.
And he was at a Comic-Con, and Judith Hoag had shown up. And I don't know how he rigged it, but he met Judith Hoag, and he asked Judith Hoag if she'd be interested in like doing a bumper for our show. And she's like, oh yeah, absolutely. So she recorded a little bumper for us, and
So cool.
It was amazing. And she always agreed to come on, but we could never iron out the details. Anytime we try to set something up, it would kind of fall through. And I didn't want to keep harassing her.
No.
Like, hey, it's been 2 years.
One of the things I've learned
I
is
just kind of let.
yeah, when somebody says,
Yeah.
I'm pretty busy, I don't know, what they're really saying is thank you, but no thank you. Sometimes-
Sure,
and
absolutely.
or at least I
Don't
want to
take it
interpret that
personal.
way instead of like, badgering too much. Like,
Exactly.
you'd rather err on the side of being polite than
Absolutely.
it's
absolutely.
not imperative that they appear.
Yes. And I've had my share of, thanks, but no thanks, or, I don't do interviews anymore, things like that. And you kind of just learn not to take that personally and take it in stride. But yeah, she was one, and still is one. If she's ever up for it, I would love to have her on the show. Absolutely.
And if anybody didn't know, she's like April O'Neil. She's before Paige Turco
Yes.
got in there.
Yes. She's another one. I'd love to talk to her too. There's a great podcast called Turtle Tracks Podcast. He gets all the interviews. I actually know the co-host or the host personally. Really nice guy. His name's Brian, but I don't know how he's done it. He's snagged a lot of celebrities in the Turtles realm. So if there's any Turtles fans listening and you haven't checked it out, it's called Turtle Tracks Podcast. It's wonderful.
May I ask you about being a teacher?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Great.
I got some stories.
Have any of the skills you developed while podcasting demonstrated themselves to be valuable in your day job?
Oh man, that's a great question. Yes, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is learning to listen. And like, say for instance in podcasting, and you know all about this, when you have a guest on, one, you obviously want to make them feel welcome, and at the same time, you want to really hone in on what they're saying. Instead, see, early on for me, I would have a list of questions that I wanted to ask my guest, whoever it was, and they might have shared something, and I might have had this follow-up question, or they had this beautiful thought that I'd love to expand on, but I was so fixated on the questions I wanted to ask that I kind of let that opportunity go, and I regret that. So I think over time, I've learned that really kind of listen to the conversation and see where it's going, and see if there's a teachable moment or a moment where I could personally learn something and kind of roll with that. Like say if somebody, say a student, for example, is sharing something and it's really, really smart what they said, but it might not have anything to do with what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Try to kind of lean into that a little bit if it can help everybody else in the process too, you know? But long story short, what I'm trying to say is I think being a podcaster and also being a teacher, I really have to hone in on the fact that it's not really about me. It's about listening to whoever's sharing and trying to bring out the best in what they have to say. So, yeah, I don't know if that made any sense, but it did in my head.
I get it. And maybe, yeah, and the practice. I mean, it's one thing to know something, but to practice it, I think, is a good opportunity as well.
Oh, absolutely.
The more you can do, the better. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What age group do you teach?
I teach middle school. Yep, 12 and 13-year-olds.
All right.
Yeah, I've been doing that for finished up my 14th year.
That's incredible. Yeah. Does I guess staying connected somewhat with I guess like something like Ninja Turtles, perhaps staying connected with something from when you were like 10, help you connect with people who are, you know, just kind of coming out of that I was just 10 age sort of thing?
Yes, absolutely, man. It helps so much for a lot of different reasons. Like it's the Turtles and of course classic games, retro games, comics, and all that stuff. They remind me of when I was a kid and the great times I had as a kid. And like I said earlier in the show, you know, and I get the sense from you too that we're just kids at heart, really. We still kind of enjoy all the stuff that we did from our childhood. So I think kind of going there knowing that in the classroom, knowing that, hey, this doesn't have to be dull. This doesn't have to be dry, what we have to learn here. Mm-hmm. Let's put a fun spin on it. Let's make this more engaging. Let's make a game out of this. And if we can still get to the end result of learning something, it doesn't really matter what style you use to get there. You know, if you can make it fun for the kids and they realize that you're kind of a big kid at heart anyway, a lot of times you can win a lot of students over that way. Mm-hmm. Now, for me, as I said earlier, I'm a people pleaser, so I might have started out a little too soft when I first started teaching, but I think over time I've learned that kind of there's a good balance between, hey, I will show you respect, but I would appreciate the same respect in return. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you know, try to make it fun, and I think that's been one of the very few things I've gotten correct in my career over time is that you can make learning fun. And I've built a lot of positive relationships with kids. And it's the same thing in podcasting, you know, for me. We're just connecting to our youth, having fun doing it. And do I make $1 million doing this podcast? Nope. Do I make $1 million teaching? Nope. But it's been extremely rewarding. And I wouldn't change it for anything.
That's good. Well, there's some peace of mind that comes along with that.
Yo, amen, man.
So to me, for, you know, making this show, reviewing all the stylistic techniques and the literary techniques and doing a literary analysis on the themes and things like that have been in the novel, that inspired me to look into pursuing a career in teaching as well. And so it's we'll see how it pans out. But it'd be, you know, quite the byproduct of producing a podcast to go and do something like that. Would you have any tips for somebody going into teaching later in their careers?
Oh, wow. So you're going into education. That's fantastic. What are you thinking?
English and history.
Oh, fantastic. I teach ELA. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I got any, you know, everybody's a little different. And I think all I can say is lean into what you love to do and lean into your strengths. There's going to be a lot of people that try to give you advice. And you kind of, you know, you take what you need and you leave the rest. I've had some people say, oh, you got to be stricter or you should be their friend and all these things. And I found out that kind of works for me. You know, I don't have many discipline issues. but I go about it in a completely different style that works for my personality. So I think you just do you, man. And if your heart's in the right place, you love the content, you enjoy your students, you're going to be successful. That's all I can say about that, you know.
And I'm sure when you get that one student you don't enjoy, the first thing that'll come to is, I'm not going to be successful. Get them power through
yes.
that.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, I've had those. You know, and then you think to yourself, you know, that one loud minority, right? You're not careful, you can let that one completely ruin your outlook on the entire class, and that's not the case. And usually that one, and it depends, of course, on your age group too, but that one, usually the reason they're being the way they are is they're desperate for attention or they're hurting in some way. So kind of looking at them from a different lens and trying to work with them while also realizing, at least for me, I have to realize my demographic is middle school. They're not adults yet. You know, they're still kids. You don't want to talk down to them like they're kids, but having expectations of them being a 38-year-old adult, that's a little unfair, you know. So I have to realize, hey, what was I like in middle school? And then I have to cringe because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm way worse than these kids were. These kids are. So, yeah.
So with the theme of new iterations and of course stuff like that, it does become a new thing, an unpredictable part of your future you did not see coming. One of the things that Crichton or Ian Malcolm says about the first iteration of a living system that's being modeled, at the earliest drawings of the fractal curve, few clues to the underlying mathematical structure will be seen. What I thought it might be fun to do the first iteration of the Ninja Turtles, 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. With the release of that film, no one might have believed that there was such an expansive multiverse of Ninja Turtle stuff out there, nor Jurassic Park stuff, I might add. But that film, as perhaps youthful in its approach to the subject of avenging ninjas and organized crime in New York City, it was tame, but it was still tremendous.
Yeah.
And what do you think that was in that film that seeded the ground for such an enduring future for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
That's a great question again, man. You're putting me on the spot here.
I guess what I'm asking is, what did you love so much that you think everybody else loved?
I think it's a combination of so many things. It's a combination of the four turtles being like four different types of personalities that at least somebody can relate to. You know, at least somebody in the audience can relate to. I'm probably more like Leonardo, but I wanted to be like Michelangelo. You know, so even though I was more like one, I wanted to be like another. So the characters themselves are so memorable. Plus, it's a great combination. And two, it's so different. It's so radically, pardon the pun, so different from anything else I'd ever seen as a kid. And to this day, I mean, new generations are coming out there going, wait, what? Mutating turtles that are ninjas? What is this? It's such a radical idea. So you got that. The characters, the idea itself is so absurd that you just can't look away. And I think the combination of action and heart, there's a lot of heart in that first movie, between the conflict between Raphael and Leonardo, and how they even get separated for a while, and you kind of long for them to get back together. They finally reconcile. Then they got to battle a great villain, speaking of characters again. So I think it's all of those. It's unique characters. It's the first place that nobody had seen before or since. And it's a combination of heart and action.
Yeah.
You know? And I think those are the core pieces that have been in all the comics that I've read, most of the TV shows that I've watched, and yeah, and not to mention a killer toy line. Come on,
yes.
They dominated the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
So
I wonder
it's
too,
all those things.
I wonder if it's there's a lot of it to do with that you're watching one show, but it has four heroes, and in a way, you can you can identify bits and pieces with each of them, and it's not necessarily that you're only one or only the other. It's like when you watch it and you have these heroes demonstrating the advantages of pursuing a particular character trait that in your real life, when you're faced with a problem, you can put on your purple bandana, You can put on your blue
Right.
bandana when you need to, right? And there's this way. Today I'm putting on the orange bandana.
Yes.
And so
Amen.
there's a way to emulate a hero, and I think that's what heroism is about. You're supposed to want to emulate
Yes.
heroes. You're supposed to relate to them and think that should I find myself in that situation, I would like to think that I could be a hero
Yes.
too, or at least fantasize
Absolutely.
that way,
I
right?
couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well,
Yes, exactly. I really like your idea of, depending on what the situation is, you can put on a different colored bandana. And you're exactly right. I mean, if you can find something, a character that you relate to in some way, you're building that connection to that character, which makes you care. And I think that is exactly right. And as an adult, there's times where I have to put on the blue bandana to be a dad, or be a teacher. But then there's also times where I'm podcasting, I'm putting on the orange bandana, so that's just the fun part about it. But again, it's all about the characters.
So I have a take on the first film while we're just still doing the first film, and I'll put on the orange bandana for this one. So in the classic 90 film, when Tatsu asks the Shredder, "Why do the turtles trouble you, master?" and he answers, "Something about the way you describe their fighting. Something familiar. Something from the past." Right?
From the past.
We're led to believe that how Tatsu has described the turtles' fighting style reminds the Shredder of his old nemesis, Hamato Yoshi's fighting style. And if we believe that Tatsu was accurate in describing the Foot's encounter with the turtles, and we review the Foot's conflicts with the turtles, we find at first, April is attacked after work. The turtles strike from the shadows and fade into the night without a trace. The second conflict in the subway, Raphael strikes from the shadows, whoops 5 guys, and fades into the sewers, leaving something of a trace, as they were able to track him back to their lair and kidnap Splinter. But the third conflict, Danny squeals on them, and we get the battle that Tatsu is present for. So this is where he's getting his details. And theoretically, this is where he requires observations on that he's able to describe their fighting style. From the rooftop, Raphael mocks, teases, and pokes jabs at the Foot Clan. Then when the battle reaches April's apartment, Mikey teases them, shows off his nunchucking skills, and they shell-shock a guy, do the Wheel of Fortune maneuver, and followed by more teasing and insults and a bicycle pedal kick. And then they strike a guy with a pair of cymbals and escape into the sewers without a trace. So Tatsu must have come back from this battle and told the Shredder, "Geez, boss, these guys teased us, joked around, showed up their nunchucking superiority, beat us up with a Wheel of Fortune maneuver, hit us with cymbals, and then they escaped without a trace." And he goes, something familiar. Something from the past. So the logical conclusion is that Hamato Yoshi was a Ace Ventura-like fighter, and Saki didn't like it, and now they're torturing him again.
Yeah, exactly. There's only one man who would beat somebody with cymbals.
Wheel of Fortune. I hated that back in ancient Japan.
Oh, that is such a good point. I never thought about the timeline of that whole scene, but you're exactly right.
Well, that's
you brought up something that, going back to podcast, you brought up something I never would have thought about before. So there you go, different perspectives.
Right on. Yeah, Saki's a perspective. Nobody listens to him.
No, he's got a good point.
So that was we'll call the first iteration of the film series. But let's go into the latest iteration. It's a bit early to say what the latest IDW series we'll be doing, but Mutant Mayhem from last summer. What did you think of that?
I liked it better the second time around than the first.
Yeah.
But I did like it. The idea, they definitely felt like teenagers in this one. In the 1990 movie, they kind of feel like teenagers. I would say they definitely feel more like teenagers in Mutant Mayhem. And they were, awkward and funny, and I like that part of it. I like some of the villains in the new movie. Of course, they brought some in from different iterations, but they also established some new ones as well, which I liked. I love the art style of it.
Yes.
I really enjoyed that. The idea of the Turtles going to high school, we hadn't seen much of that before. So that's fascinating to me. So overall, it's still not my favorite just because I prefer certain versions more. But I really like that they tried something new. And I'm curious to see where it's going. Really excited about the new cartoon as well. But yeah, I liked it overall. What about you?
I thought that the message about, and rarely do you, I mean, I guess maybe you would if you watched shows of that ilk, but the idea that you're kind of feeling on the outside and you want to fit in as a group, and and you wind up kind of in the wrong crowd, and then wondering what to do about it, that was really important. But certainly relating with Splinter on a different level, because now we're parents, right? We're not the Ninja Turtles anymore. Now we're the Splinters, and looking at it and worrying that you see the quirks and how your kids are different from, generally the quote unquote normal crowds, and you're like, how are they going to fit in? And worrying about how they're going to fit in with people, and just saying, don't associate with this, or somebody's acting like that, get out of there, and trying to help them cope, and just being super protective. And then having his foil as that super cool Superfly, like that guy was put together. I mean, that could have been a travesty or a farce, but he was awesome. And
he was great.
He was great. Tough. Yeah, I think that again, but him seeing Superfly is doing the same thing, and how, like, are we? I don't know. It was really a story about Splinter coming to terms with things as much as it was about the Turtles, and I thought that was good too. In that respect, it really delivered in a lot of ways that I thought I didn't know I needed, and I thought it was pretty cool. I liked it way more than the kids did, and the kids liked it. I think they like the Ninja Turtles. They think awesome. It's fun that they eat pizza. They think that's just the best.
I guess as a father, do you look back at a lot of the movies and stuff, and you kind of identify more with the father? Like, no, you know what? Dad was right. In whatever movie you're watching. Because being a parent, it kind of ruins some of the movies that I loved as a kid. Because as a kid, I'm like, oh, come on. Whatever family dynamic of the show or the movie I'm watching, I'm like, oh, come on, Dad. Let the kids have fun. And then now, as a parent, like, no, that's dangerous. That could hurt those kids. I completely understand with that grumpy dad.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember loving thinking to the music, the soundtrack to the movie matched. It was like an ugly art style. I understand that they tried to match like a sketchbook from a high schooler's do-a-tang or whatever. But when I got back, I was like, who is it? It sounds like 80s, but it's like 90s, but it's like grungy, but it's like, what is this? And he was like, it's Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails. It's exactly that. It's exactly what it is. And
wow.
and it's, I mean, you listen to the soundtrack and it's hard to get through. It's so edgy and abrasive, and it sets such a grungy tone. And I think that there was a way that it was grungy to make it gritty without being like too dark. So the style and the soundtrack gave it that edgier feel without actually having to put any blood and guts, from ninjas.
You're exactly right. No, you're exactly right. And nothing looks or sounds just like it.
No.
That I've seen. So I mean, it's got a unique style already that I think is going to make it stand out. In the future for sure. When we come back and look at this again in retrospect.
Well, we're getting close to an hour, and I want to say there's something I want to say about. I guess I got into listening to podcasts over the pandemic, just because that was a time when people were exploring new ways to fill their times, and so a podcast was something that I began looking into. I didn't know what to listen to, and so at one point I mentioned just figure, I'll just look for shows about stuff that I used to like when I was a kid, and obviously that's when I came across a sizable back catalog. About a show that was also updating somewhat regularly, and even though it was a little inactive at times, but I was really excited to find, I forget what it was called, I don't know if it was Turtle Radio or what it was at the time.
Yeah, but, probably Turtle Tales Radio, yeah.
I'm so happy to have you on because, your show was influential in how I decided I wanted to put my show together. I like the musical intros and outros, and so I wanted to do something like that as well. I like the kind of casual banter that goes on in the background. I wasn't really going to be able to put that together. But there was a lightness and certainly a positive tone that felt essential to producing a show, and I related to that, and I wanted to characterize that, I wanted that to characterize what I was doing too. So your show has been a healthy and helpful and positive influence, not only during the pandemic, but into the production of what I've been wanting to do here. So it's been a goal to have you as a guest, and I want to thank you personally for bringing more of those qualities into the universe when you put things together.
Oh, well, thank you very much. A lot to me, man, and I'm so sorry it's taking so long to get on here.
It's all right.
No, I really am, and it's one of those things. The positivity part of it. I remember when before we even started the Turtles podcast, there was a show called What the Shell Podcast. That was the first Ninja Turtles podcast I'd ever heard. And I think we were just starting out, and somehow they found our show and plugged our show on theirs. And I thought that was so kind, So from that moment forward, I kind of wanted to just pay it forward by being positive, by plugging other shows and everything. So that's always been kind of an active choice to be positive when there's a lot of negativity out there. So I'm really honored, and I appreciate you getting something out of that. And it's been a joy to be here, man. I've really enjoyed this, and I'd love to have you on our show very soon. We got to make that happen.
Well, whatever works for you, that's fine with me. But thank you again. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for being a part of this. If people were interested in finding more about this great show that I'm telling people I think is great, where could they go to find it? What would they look for? And what do you got coming up?
Oh, thanks, man. So you can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just Google search Turtles Forever Podcast. I also do a retro show. It's actually the first podcast I've ever done with my childhood best friend, Landon. It's called The Retro Junkies. You can Google search that as well. And we got a great interview coming up with Patrick Ellers, who's doing the TMNT source book that IDW is currently publishing. We're gonna do that interview tomorrow night. So hopefully in about a week or so, I'll try to get it edited and posted it as fast as I can. But thank you again, Ryan. It's been a great, great time. Looking forward to talking Turtles with you very soon, man.
Right on. So what kind of pizza would you like to leave with?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think my go-to pizza, this is just me. I'm kind of crazy. People cringe when I say this, but I love a pineapple and bacon cheese pizza.
All right.
I don't know why. I like the sweetness of the pineapple. I like the saltiness of the bacon. Combined, it's wonderful.
Yeah, pineapple and bacon's a classic choice, sure. And maybe not on a pizza all the time. Right on.
Every now and then, right?
Well, there you go. Well, thanks again to Rob.
Yeah, man. Well, dude. Well, thank you again, Ryan, for having me, man. It's been a great time. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you so much for being on. All right, a terrific thank you to Rob for coming on the show. Thank you so much, Rob. All right, we got some new things going on. So today's episode is about the iterations, and I'll go into how they are used in the novel. Granted, much of this is going to be speculative, but I'll also enter into a new iteration of this podcast here. Right? The chapters are all done. So stay tuned in this episode. We've got two analyses. First is a review of the iterations in Jurassic Park, what they may mean and how we may interpret them. And the second is a review of the first scene of the film Jurassic Park from 1993 and which elements it has borrowed from the novel. So we'll get into that. All right, the iterations. There are 7 iterations in Jurassic Park, each creating something of an act break throughout the narrative. Each has a quote attributed to Dr. Ian Malcolm and is accompanied by an image that grows and becomes more complex from the first to the 7th iteration. It's plainly interpreted that each image is a subsequent representation of a graph as a series of iterations are being modeled. As the iterations progress, the modeling progresses until you get a propeller shape, which I understand is called a dragon curve, but that's not a term used in the novel. On pages 245 and 246, John Arnold tells Donald Gennaro about Malcolm's models. Quote, Ian Malcolm is a mathematician specializing in chaos theory, quite amusing and personable, but basically what he does besides wear black is use computers to model the behavior of complex systems. And John Hammond loves the latest scientific fads, so he asked Malcolm to model the system at Jurassic Park, which Malcolm did. Malcolm's model are all phase space shapes on a computer screen. Have you seen them? No, Gennaro said. Well, they look like a weird twisted ship's propeller. According to Malcolm, the behavior of any system follows the surface of the propeller. You with me? Not exactly, Gennaro said. Arnold held his hand in the air. Quote, let's say I put a drop of water on the back of my hand. That drop is going to run off my hand. Maybe it'll run down towards my wrist. Maybe it'll run towards my thumb or down between my fingers. I don't know for sure where it will go, but I know it will run somewhere along the surface of my hand. It has to. Okay, Gennaro said. Chaos theory treats the behavior of a whole system like a drop of water moving on a complicated propeller surface. The drop may spiral down or slip outward toward the edge. It may do many different things depending, but it will always move along the surface of the propeller. Okay. Malcolm's models tend to have a ledge or a sharp incline where the drop of water will speed up greatly. He modestly calls this speeding up movement the Malcolm effect. The whole system could suddenly collapse. And that was what he said about Jurassic Park, that it had inherent instability. Inherent instability, Gennaro said. And what did you do when you got this report? We disagreed with it, and ignored it, of course, Arnold said. Was that wise? It's self-evident, Arnold said. We're dealing with living systems, after all. This is life, not computer models. So it's my interpretation that these iterations in the novel are excerpts from Malcolm's report to InGen on the viability of Jurassic Park, and what chaos theory has to say about it. We know Malcolm gave the report to InGen before they broke ground, and Malcolm provided more copies to the inspectors, the safety inspectors. On several occasions we're told of Malcolm's report, and that it contains these, quote, propeller shapes. This all suggests, without saying explicitly, that these are graphics and images and quotes from Malcolm's report to InGen. So, the story of Malcolm's report is this. First iteration. Quote, at the earliest drawings of the fractal curve, few clues to the underlying mathematical structure will be seen. In other words, everything will seem fine at first, or, as the graph is plotting, its true shape does not reveal itself. And recall, Malcolm is very good at interpreting graphs just by their shape, without even looking at the challenging math. If we suggest that Jurassic Park is a living system, then perhaps, while they were preparing for the park, gathering resources, and embarking upon their scientific feats, signs that things might go wrong were not immediately evident, or few clues to the underlying mathematical structure were seen. In other words, initially the modeling doesn't draw a curve that sets off any red flags right away. Second iteration, and it says, quote, with subsequent drawings of the fractal curve, sudden changes may appear. Or in other words, changes or surprising, unpredictable things, but perhaps banal things too, may suddenly start being evident in your system. Recall, in this model, the system is Jurassic Park. And we learn that early on at Jurassic Park, they stumbled upon complications. Sudden changes occurred. But by the second iteration, quote, sudden changes may appear, we're told on page 29. These changes are unpredictable according to chaos theory because of the variability in initial conditions. However, once those unpredictable changes are modeled, details emerge more clearly. On page 122, Wu tells Hammond that the dinosaurs are faster and more challenging than they prepared for. He says, quote, but John, Wu said, remember back in 87 when we started to build the containment devices? We didn't have any full-grown adults yet, so we had to predict what we'd need. We ordered a big taser shocker, cars with cattle prods mounted on them, guns that blow out electric nets, all built specially to our specifications. We got a whole array of devices now, and they're all too slow. In other words, once they have dinosaurs at Jurassic Park, they begin to discover that they are unprepared for them after all. Dinosaurs are not as expected, and do not behave as expected. So, sudden changes have appeared. Third iteration. By the third iteration, Malcolm's calculation says, quote, details emerge more clearly as the fractal curve is redrawn, on page 81, suggesting that the overall picture, with warts and all, begins to present itself. You begin to see a more realistic vision for the park. How have the dinosaurs and their alien behaviors affected it? Some are getting sick, we're told on page 139. The stegosaurs frequently get blisters on their tongues and diarrhea for reasons no one yet understands, even though we've lost 2. The Triceratops females kill each other in fights for dominance and have to be separated into groups smaller than 6. We don't know why. The Tyrannosaurs drink the lagoon water and sometimes get sick. We aren't sure why. Hypsilophodonts get skin rashes, and the Velociraptors. And on page 146, Muldoon reveals they've had troubles discovering the Dilophosaurs were poison spitters. Quote, nobody even suspected the Dilophosaurs were poisonous until they were observed hunting indigenous rats on the island, biting the rodents and then stepping back to wait for them to die. And even then, nobody suspected the Dilophosaurs could spit until one of the handlers was almost blinded by spitting venom. And then there's the engineering issues. John Arnold lists a variety of issues they're having with the park, beginning with the gears grinding on the Land Cruisers on page 139. Arnold said, quote, you gotta realize that from an engineering standpoint, Jurassic Park is by far the most ambitious theme park in history. Visitors will never think about it, but I do. He ticked the points off on his fingers. First, Jurassic Park has all the problems of any amusement park. Ride maintenance, queue control, transportation, food handling, living accommodations, trash disposal, security. Second, we have all the problems of a major zoo, care of the animals, health and welfare, feeding and cleanliness, protection of it from insects, pests, allergies, and illnesses, maintenance of barriers, and all the rest. Oh, and they discovered that their double contingencies they put in place to make sure the animals couldn't breed is failing. That happens too. Suddenly, there's 54 new animals in the park, most of which are velociraptors. Great. The fourth iteration. By this point, the quote tells us, inevitably, underlying instabilities begin to appear. This coincides with the first tourists entering the park, and the fences are down, and the motion sensors aren't picking up people. People are getting seriously hurt and killed. The phone lines are jammed, and there's a significant tropical storm. Muldoon's access to a gas-powered jeep and an important firearm is restricted. The one man who can restore power in the park is killed. Everything has gone to pot. Moving into the fifth iteration, it tells us, quote, flaws in the system will now become severe, on page 269. Or, in chaos theory terms, we get a Malcolm effect. On page 246, we're told, quote, Malcolm's models tend to have a ledge or sharp incline where the drop of water will speed up greatly. He modestly calls this speeding up movement the Malcolm effect. The whole system could suddenly collapse. And that was what he said about Jurassic Park, that it had inherent instability. They think things are going well, but It's no coincidence the 5th iteration ends up with auxiliary power being low on page 299 and the park shutting down hardcore. They reset the system and Arnold goes to restore power at the maintenance shed, but he gets eaten by a velociraptor. The Malcolm effect strikes again, and Malcolm sighs, "Do you have any idea how unlikely it is that you or any of us will get off this island alive?" On 314. And by the 6th spin around the sun, it tells us systems control may prove impossible on 315. This is shorthand for the velociraptors got out, but also the fences are down, and animals are mingling with each other where they're not supposed to. Quote, "The fences have been down for hours," Grant said. "The animals are mingling with each other, populations reaching a true Jurassic equilibrium," on page 370. And there really is little chance that they're going to get the power back on. There are bits and pieces of security guards all over the visitor center. The raptors can get through any doors they want, whereas humans can't seem to get through doors. It's chaos. But recall, this isn't describing what's happening at Jurassic Park. This document and these quotes are not reacting to the story. They were provided to Jurassic Park before they broke ground, we're told on page 159. And Malcolm was straightforward the moment Gennaro charges the consultants with their task, to evaluate whether Jurassic Park is safe. And he said, quote, "From my point of view, such an undertaking is impossible. The mathematics are so self-evident that they don't need to be calculated," he says on page 90. The movie adapted this very specifically and adeptly. The film truly captured Malcolm's message very well when he says, "John, the kind of control you're attempting here, it's not possible." And Sattler reaffirms it with Hammond when she says, "You never had control. That's the illusion." Malcolm's report calculated that controlling a living system at Jurassic Park was impossible. And Malcolm takes one look at the place and agrees. There are far too many variables. Too much reliance on the animals behaving predictably, when the reality is that the animals are completely and utterly unknown commodities, thus entirely unpredictable. Yet their systems are designed as if the dinosaurs were going to behave in a certain way. On page 140, we're told, "From the beginning, this had been one of the core beliefs of the planners. The animals, however exotic, would fundamentally behave like animals in zoos anywhere. They would learn the regularities of their care, and they would respond." The 7th iteration, quote, "Increasingly, the mathematics will demand the courage to face its implications." Page 365. This is the final iteration where they restore power and get things back under control at the park. They have survived the catastrophic Malcolm effect with their lives, some of them. But the mathematics say if you do this and the model plays out, it demands the courage to face its implications. On page 159, Malcolm says, "Jurassic Park won't go as planned. It's inherently unpredictable, just as the weather is." Malcolm suggests the fitness of the animals and controlling the spread of life forms were other areas his calculations said would fail. Quote, "Because the history of evolution is that life escapes all barriers. Life breaks free. Life expands to new territories, painfully, perhaps even dangerously, but life finds a way." Malcolm shook his head. "I don't mean to be philosophical, but there it is." And what does Irwin Chargaff tell us in the epigraphs? You cannot recall a new form of life. But if life finds a way and breaks free, even though Chargaff says you cannot recall it, you need to have the courage to try. Quote, "Demand the courage to face its implications," is the quote. In this case, the final chapters here are about entering the raptor's nest and counting eggs to somehow quantify how many dinosaurs may have escaped to the mainland. Summoning this courage and taking responsibility is primarily addressed in the 7th iteration through the actions and persuasion to act of Donald Gennaro. Grant pins him up against the wall and berates him for, quote, "shirking his responsibilities" on page 372, and he's forced down a rabbit hole to count eggs on page 384. So there you are, the iterations explained as best as I can figure. To summarize, they are excerpts from Malcolm's report that he gave to Jurassic Park before they broke ground. The fractal curves are images of the computer modeling plotting a curve over iterations. Malcolm sees the shape of the curve over many iterations and sees that there will be critical failures, recalled just by looking at the Gaussian distribution of the Procoms-Ignatius growth charts on page 132 and the infant mortality charts on pages 89 and 90. Malcolm could identify how many factors were involved and make meaningful deductions. The same is with these dragon curves or propeller shapes. Those shapes mean your system isn't stable. And it's neat to see that the quotes, in some ways, do foresee what will happen in the next section of the novel. Sort of. All right, let's move on to the next iteration of the show. In episode 13, Shadow, with terrific guest Phil Hort, Phil made a terrific observation that it's shocking how much of the novel is in the movie. All kinds of little beats and tiny details are adapted right from the text. Granted, they just couldn't fit everything from the text into the movie. There's just so much. So I thought it'd be worthwhile to go back and review the film scene by scene and identify all the references to the source text, beginning with the first scene in the movie, accident at Isla Nublar. I'll read a transcript. I've got access to David Koepp's draft of the script, and Maria Scotch Marmo's draft of the script as well, and we'll review all the details from the novel and how this film was put together. All right, Act 1, Accident at Isla Nublar. We have bustling foliage, a stoic face of a worker in a helmet, and they all look very serious, and then Muldoon is armed, and he's waiting for what's coming through the foliage. But it's not an animal, it's a vehicle carrying a container. It's driven by a forklift to a loading bay. The camera zooms on Muldoon, armed with a shotgun. A crane brings forth a large metal container, which drives forward. An impressive-looking paddock enters view. People are shouting orders as the metal container comes forward. Worker says, "Everybody heads up." Another one is speaking in Spanish. The caption reads, "Isla Nublar, 120 miles west of Costa Rica." We can hear the caged animal purring and shrieking unearthly sounds inside. Robert Muldoon says, "Okay, pushing team, move in there." There's some more speaking in Spanish. Muldoon says, "I want tasers on full charge." And then the loading team grabs the cage, and a terrifying shriek frightens them away, and the cage shakes a little bit. And Muldoon says, "Go on, step back in." And then they say some more stuff in Spanish. Looks like they're saying push. Robert Muldoon says push, and the workers push the cage into the paddock entrance until an electronic beep buzzes. Muldoon says, "We're locked. Loading team, step away. Gatekeeper." And note, if we're locked means that it was secured. I guess that was proven not to be true because the raptor seems to knock it free anyhow. Joffrey climbs up on top of the cage, and the creature looks up and snarls. And Muldoon says, "Joffrey, raise the gate." And Joffrey begins to raise the gate. The creature suddenly shrieks and rams the back of the cage, shoving the metal container backward and knocking Joffrey to the ground. It begins pulling him into the cage, and Muldoon grabs him. "Block the opening, don't let her out." So it's not about the dude, it's about keeping it from getting out. Worker 2, "Somebody help him." The dude is lifted bodily up into the air, and this reminds me of Spielberg's work on Jaws, when you can see the swimmer being shaken back and forth. That's a very Spielberg moment. Robert Muldoon, "Worker back!" And the workers begin tasering the creature, and then the creature looks Muldoon right in the eye. That's what that shot's supposed to be. "Shoot her!" he yells, and Joffrey groans, and the creature pulls him through Muldoon's grip as gunfire is heard, and the scene transitions away. So what is from the novel that's in this scene here? To start, we're told that this is Isla Nublar, 120 miles off the coast of Costa Rica. This jives with one account in the novel. On page 6, Manuel Aragon at the Bahia Anasco Clinic tells Dr. Bobby Carter of the island where the InGen helicopter is from, and he says, quote, "In the ocean, perhaps 120 miles offshore." But Bob Morris tells Alan Grant on page 36 the island is, quote, 100 miles off the west coast. And on page 46, Hammond tells Grant over the phone, "Oh yes, we bought it and started our operation, 4 or 5 years ago now. I forget exactly. Called Isla Nublar, big island, 100 miles offshore." So there is some inconsistency, and it looks like the screenwriter just went with the first mention in the novel, which was on page 6. There's nothing wrong with that. So this is likely a reimagining of the construction accident scene from the prologue, The Bite of the Raptor, that we get on page 1 of the novel. The worker is said to have fallen and a backhoe ran over him, we're told on page 3, but the injuries appear to be from a mauling, not a construction accident. This worker dies and is whisked away, you'll recall. This is only representative of one of the instances that are plaguing Jurassic Park, as on page 62, Gennaro is questioning Hammond ahead of the inspection. Quote, "I heard there were accidents during construction," Gennaro said. "Some workmen died." "Yes, there were several accidents," Hammond said, "and a total of 3 deaths. 2 workers died building the cliff road, and 1 other died as a result of an earth mover accident in January." Further, on page 147, raptors were at least as intelligent as chimpanzees, and like chimpanzees, they had agile hands that Muldoon recalls. Quote, "They, the velociraptors, could escape with ease. And when, as Muldoon had feared, one of them finally escaped, it killed 2 construction workers and maimed a third before being recaptured. After that episode, the visitor lodge had been reworked with heavy barred gates, a high perimeter fence, and tempered glass windows, and the raptor holding pen was rebuilt with electronic sensors to warn of another impending escape." So the novel outlines several instances where raptors have escaped, have attacked, and have killed workers. The most prominent is the sick worker, delivered by Ed Regis to the clinic at Bahia Anasco in January 1989, which might have been Regis's first week on the job. Big differences, though. Everyone is visibly armed with shotguns and big tasers and loads of weapons in the film here. The novel is clear there aren't any weapons effective for dealing with dinosaurs. On page 250, we're told, quote, "We have tranquilizer guns that shoot a 20cc dart," Muldoon said. "Fine for an animal that weighs 400 or 500 pounds. The Tyrannosaur weighs 8 tons. It wouldn't even feel it." "You ordered larger weapons." "I ordered 3 larger weapons, Mr. Hammond, but you cut the requisition, so we only got 1. And it's gone. Nedry took it when he left." He later concludes his argument with Hammond. "It's your park, Mr. Hammond. You didn't want anybody to be able to injure your precious dinosaurs. Well, now you got a Rexin with the sauropods, there's not a damn thing you can do about it." Further on page 271, Muldoon says, "The Rex is out there somewhere," he said, squinting at the landscape in the morning sun. "We don't have any weapons worth a damn." And at page 372, they're still looking for weapons. Grant turned to Muldoon, quote, "What have we got for weapons?" Muldoon said, "We've got some control nets and shock prods." "How good are the shock prods?" Grant said. "They're like bang sticks for sharks. They have an explosive capacitor tip, delivers a shock on contact. High voltage, low amps, not fatal, but it's definitely incapacitating. So the park is definitely unarmed against the dinosaurs. All the shotguns and stuff in the movie are dreamed up by the scriptwriter." Further, there are a lot of park employees and staff. Jurassic Park was designed to run with minimal staff. On page 62, quote, "And the secret to making money in a park," Hammond said, "is to limit your personnel costs. The food handlers, ticket takers, cleanup crews, repair teams, to make a park that runs with minimal staff. That was why we invested in all the computer technology. We automated wherever we could. This sets up the park's over-reliance on the computers for control. On page 369, we're told, there were only 24 people on the island that day. As near as they could determine, out of 24 people on the island, 8 were dead and 6 more were missing. Spoiler alert. But if we go through the count, all the Kathys, Marias, and Ramones, and the lab techs and grounds crew, and people handing out pith helmets, you can unofficially tally up like more than 40 people out of the novel. But in the spirit of the text, it is that there are very few people on the island. Any army of armed Marlboro men lined up to move a dinosaur in a container isn't in the spirit of the novel. And finally, instead of meeting Ed Regis in the opening moments, we are introduced to Robert Muldoon. That's a little different. Now, where do some of these new ideas come from? I have a copy of the 1992 screenplay, and it opens differently. From David Koepp, his first idea was an eyeball, big, yellowish, distinctly inhuman, stares raptly between wooden slats, part of a large crate. The eye darts from side to side, alert as hell. This is new. A legend tries to place us, Isla Nublar, 120 miles west of Costa Rica, which is the same as the script. But to us, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's quiet for a second. A roar rises up from the jungle, deafening. The trees shake as something very, very large plows ahead through them, right at us. Every head gathered in this little clearing snaps, turning in the direction of the sound as it bursts through the trees. This is still the same transcript, right? It's a bulldozer. Well, it drops its scoop and pushes forward into the back end of the crate, shoving it across the jungle floor towards an impressive fenced structure that towers over an enclosed section of thick jungle. There's a guard tower at one end of this holding open that makes it look like San Quentin. So this is a bulldozer, not a forklift, and the pen is said to look like San Quentin, a famous prison, perhaps alluding to the moment in the novel where the first glances at Isla Nublar look like Alcatraz, another famous prison. The bulldozer pushes forward into the back end. The crate thuds to the floor. The door slides open in the pen, making a space as big as the end of the crate. Nobody moves for a second. A grim-faced guy who seems to be in charge, Robert Muldoon, although we don't know that yet, says, "All right, now push us, move in, loading team, move it." This is kind of similar dialogue, officially different. Movement has agitated whatever is inside the crate, and the whole thing shivers as growls and snaps come from inside. Everyone moves back. "All right, steady. Get in there now. Push. Get back in there. Don't let her know you're afraid." So Muldoon's a little different here. The men go back to the crate and begin to push it into the slot. The crate thuds up against the opening. A green light on the side of the pen lights up, showing contact has been made. In the film, the raptor pen goes from red to green as well. From inside the crate, we get glimpses of what's on the other side of the wooden slats. Jungle foliage, men with rifles, searching searchlights. The view is herky-jerky as the crate is put into motion. Muldoon says, "Well locked. Loading team, step away. Joffrey, raise the gate." Identical, unchanged in the final movie. Joffrey has a name here too. Original character, not in the novel. A worker climbs to the top of the crate. The searchlights are trained on the door. The rifleman throws the bolts on their rifles and crack their stun guns, sending arcs of current cracking through the air. The worker gets ready to grab the crate when all at once, a roar from inside the crate, and the panel flies out of his hands and smacks into him, knocking him clear of the crate. Now everything happens at once. The worker thuds to the jungle floor, the crate jerks away from the mouth of the holding pen flash, and an alarm buzzer sounds. This is all the same. This is like the first draft, and it's made out into the final cut. And a claw slashes out from the inside of the crate, sinks into the ankle of the worker, dragging him toward the dark mouth between the crate and the pen. The worker screams and paws the dirt, leaving long claw marks as he is rapidly dragged toward the crate. In the film, we don't actually get to see these claws yet. And Muldoon shows out, "Tasers, get in there! God damn it!" And they fire their guns. The wood of the crate splinters. In the draft, the crate is wood. Muldoon runs in and grabs the worker, trying to pull him free, and wild arcs of currents from the stun guns flash and crack all around. But in a second, the worker is gone. It's kind of how we end in the final draft as well. Yikes. And I have an even older version of the script, which I'm calling the Marmo Re-Write, which is Maria Scotch Marmo's pass at the script after receiving a draft from Michael Crichton himself. So in the Marmo Re-Write of 1992, it's an extreme close-up of glowing honey-colored stones. Their shapes abstract as the camera examines air bubbles and crystalline patterns. Moving up and over this amber abstraction, the camera finds unusual shapes and imperfections caught in the glassy stone. Flecks of dirt, hairs, cracks, still moving starbursts of light ricochet off the different surfaces of the stones, and the camera turns along a creamy stretch of amber. It turns in deeper, abstracting the picture further only to find a tiny blur that suddenly racks into focus. A bug. A mosquito lodged within an amber tomb. It is folded on its back. Slow motion as the tip of a fine-pointed drill bores into the amber toward the trapped bug. Orange flecks fly. The mosquito trembles. The drill continues, stopping just before it touches the tiny body. A shiny pair of thin needle-nose pliers reach in the bore hole and extricate the mosquito remains. These are dropped on a brightly lit glass slide. The conveyor belt starts, and the slide moves along, arriving under a long-lensed microscope. In microscopic perspective, a thin needle pierces the bug and delicately removes a fragment of tissue. Pincers snare the fragment, dropping it into a narrow tube. The tube spins faster and faster until it is a blur on the screen, and the screen floods with an infrared light. Gray oval-shaped rocks in a neutral mist, and it washes to the Badlands. So Marmo's Re-Write from Crichton's text didn't have a raptor attack to open the scene, which makes that scene an adaptation from Koepp's imagination. And we can see how it's related to the novel, but Koepp's adaptation militarizes the park significantly. That said, later as we get through the Marmo Re-Write, we'll see that she wrote a very well-armed Jurassic Park as well, so perhaps Koepp was adapting her script and just moving forward. Alright, thank you to my guest today, Rob Luther from the Turtles Forever podcast. He's been on my wish list for years, and I'm really glad that you came on, Rob. Thank you. I want to sign off today thanking you for joining me as well. If you want to read along in the book, add some thoughts to what we've been discussing on the show, or be a guest on the show and chat with me about anything you like about Jurassic Park, you can do that by connecting with me at ryansrogers@gmail.com. If you'd like to be a guest, drop me a line and we can try and set something up. We can rehash, tear down, gush over and chit-chat about any part of the book, or also not the book, all you'd like. Jurassic Park-Cast is part of the Spring Chickens banner of amateur intellectual properties, including the Spring Chickens Funny Pages, Tomb of the Undead graphic novel, the Second Lapse graphic novelettes, The Infantry, and the worst of them all, the King Street Capers. And you can find links to all that baggage in the show notes or by visiting the schickens.blogspot.com, or finding us on Facebook at facebook.com/springchickencapers, or on YouTube by searching for the Jurassic Park-Cast podcast, or on Tumblr at Mr. Rogers22, and I'm still on Twitter at Roger Ryan. Thank you dearly for tuning into the Jurassic Park-Cast, the Jurassic Park podcast, where we talk about the novel Jurassic Park, and also not that too. Until next time.